Konnichiwa. Today we're going to talk about tenses. Up to now, we've only been using one tense, and that is the one represented by the plain dictionary form of verbs taberu, eat, haruku, walk, and so forth. To use natural-sounding Japanese, we need 3 tenses. You might think they would be past, present, and future, but in fact they're not. The one we've been using up to now is not a present tense. It's called the non-past tense, and a lot of people think this is confusing. Why can't Japanese have a simple present tense like English instead of something vague and mysterious like a non-past tense? Well, actually it isn't confusing at all, and what makes it confusing is word change, not the fact that Japanese is taught in a strange way, but the fact that English is taught in a strange way. The truth is that the Japanese non-past tense is very similar to the English non-past tense. What is the English non-past tense? Well, it is the plain dictionary form of English words. Eat, walk, etc. Why do I call it a non-past tense? Well, let's take an example. Suppose you get a message on your keitai saying, I walked to the cafe and now I eat cake and drink coffee. What would you know about the person who sent that message? Well, you'd know that it was not a native English speaker, wouldn't you? Because no native English speaker says, I eat cake and I drink coffee, when they mean I am eating cake and drinking coffee right now. When do we say I eat cake? Well, we might say it when we mean that we eat cake sometimes. I eat cake. I'm not one of these people who doesn't eat cake. I do eat cake. Whenever there's any cake around, I eat it. But that doesn't mean I'm eating cake right at this moment. When else do we use the English non-past plain form of verbs? Well, sometimes we use them for future events. Next week, I fly to Tokyo. Next month, I have an exam. And sometimes we use them for something that's going on right now, but not mostly. For example, in a literary description. The sun sinks over the sea, and a small, happy robot runs across the beach. But that isn't the way we use it most of the time in everyday speech, is it? So, the Japanese non-past tense is very similar in the way it functions to the English non-past tense. If you can understand one, you can pretty much understand the other. Most of the time, the Japanese non-past tense refers to future events. Inu ga taberu, the dog will eat. Sakura ga haruku, Sakura will walk. The way we've been using it up to now, Sakura walks, is possible, but it isn't the most natural way. We've been using it that way because it was the only tense we knew. If we want to say something more natural, like Sakura is walking, what do we do? Well, what do we do in English? In English we say, don't we? Sakura is walking. We use the word to be. You can be walking. Sakura is walking. We are walking. Fortunately, in Japanese we don't have all these different forms of the word to be. We use the same word every time, and the word is iru. Iru means be in relation to animals and people, and to make this continuous present tense, we always use iru. So, Sakura is walking, Sakura ga haruite iru. Dog is eating, inu ga tabete iru. Now let's notice that in a sentence like inu ga tabete iru, we have something we haven't yet seen, and that's a white engine. A white engine is an element that could be an engine, but in this case, it's not the engine of this sentence. It's modifying or telling us more about one of the core elements of the sentence. So, the core of this sentence is inu ga iru. The dog is. But the dog isn't just existing, the dog is doing something. And that white engine tells us what it is doing. It is eating. And we're going to see this white engine structure over and over again as we go deeper into Japanese. And just as in English, we don't say the dog is eat. We use a special form of the verb that goes along with the verb of being. So in English we say is walking, is eating. In Japanese we say tabete iru, aruite iru. Now, how do we form this te form, which is the form we use for making the continuous present? With a word like taberu, it's very easy indeed. All we have to do is take off the ru and put te in its place. The bad news is that with other verbs, we do have slightly different ways of attaching the te. Apart from the plain ru form, there are 4 other ways. The textbooks will say 5, but in fact 2 of them are so similar that we can treat them as 4. And I've made a video on exactly what these ways are. And I think it makes it much simpler than most explanations, so very important to watch that so that you can learn how to form the continuous present tense. The good news, it's perfectly regular. Once you know the ending of a verb, you also know how to put the te onto it. The only one that's a bit tricky is ru ending verbs, but the video will explain that. So how do we put things into the past tense? Fortunately, that's very easy indeed. All we do is add ta. That's the whole thing. So, inuga taberu, dog will eat. Inuga tabeta, dog ate. Now there are different ways of attaching ta to different kinds of verbs with different endings, but the good news here is that they are exactly the same as the ways that you attach te. So once you've learned the ways that te attaches, you also learn the ways that ta attaches. So if you watch that te form video, you'll be able to do both a continuous present and the past. Now there's one more thing about time expressions that I think is useful to learn now. If we want to make it clear when we say watashi wa keiki o taberu that we're talking about a future event, we can say ashita, which means tomorrow. Ashita keiki wo taberu. Tomorrow I will eat cake. And that's all we have to do. We just say tomorrow before we say the rest of the sentence, just as we do in English. Tomorrow I'm going to eat cake. Ashita keiki wo taberu. Now, tomorrow is what we call a relative time expression because it's relative to today. Today is yesterday's tomorrow. And there's all relative time expressions like that. Yesterday, last week, next year, and so forth. Times that are relative to the present time. We just do what we did then. We put the time expression at the beginning of the sentence, and that puts the whole sentence into that time. However, when we have an absolute time expression, an expression which is not relative to the present, such as Tuesday or 6 o'clock, then we have to use ni. Tuesday is kayobi, and we may say kayobi ni keiki wo taberu. On Tuesday, I will eat cake. Now, the important thing here is that it can seem a bit complicated to have to work out, is that time absolute or relative? And the good thing to know here is that it's not complicated at all because it works exactly the same as English. In English, we say, tomorrow I ate cake, next week I have an exam, and so forth. But when we use an absolute time expression, we say, on Monday I will eat cake, at 6 o'clock I have an exam. If we're talking about a month, we say, in July I'm going to Tokyo. Now Japanese works in exactly the same way, except that we don't have to remember when we're using on, when we're using at, and when we're using in. In Japanese, we use ni every time. But in English, when we need one of those little words, on, in, or at, then we need ni in Japanese. And when we don't, then we don't need ni in Japanese. English and Japanese are identical in that respect. So rather than sitting down to work out is this relative or is this absolute, just think whether you need an on, in, or at in English, and if you do, you need ni in Japanese. And if you don't need ni in Japanese. It's really as simple as that. Now, in these 4 lessons so far, we've covered an awful lot of Japanese, and now we're able to do quite a few things. So I think we need some way of consolidating this work. Therefore, I've made some worksheets. So if you're learning Japanese for the first time, or if you want to refresh with some worksheets, I'm going to tell you how to get them in the information section below. So take a look there at the end of this video, and I'll give you all the details. Now, I'd like to thank my 3 Producer Angel Gold Kokeshi patrons, Maria del Martello, Electric Dragonfly, and Pacifico Bon Magno. Thank you for your support. Thank you for helping to make this series and this work possible. And thank you to all my patrons on Patreon. And to everyone, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments below and I will answer. Thank you for attending this lesson. Korikaramu yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Just rest.